London, November 15th, 1979, and the autumn chill seeps through the stone corridors of Westminster as Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher rises in the House of Commons, her voice cutting through the expectant silence like a blade through silk, each word dropping with the weight of 15 years of buried secrets. When she speaks the name that has haunted British intelligence since the war ended and the Cold War began in earnest, Professor Blunt has admitted that he was recruited by and acted for Russian intelligence. The words echo in the chamber, where democracy's most sacred debates unfold. But today, democracy itself seems fragile, compromised, as if the very walls that have heard centuries of parliamentary discourse suddenly realize they have been listening to lies all along. Because Anthony Blunt, the man Thatcher has just exposed to the world, has been walking these same corridors for decades, carrying secrets from Buckingham Palace to his Soviet handlers, and the revelation strikes like lightning against the backdrop of Britain's most treasured institutions. Hello there. If this brief is useful, like the video, so this series reaches more people who care about real records, not rumors. Subscribe for more declassified stories. In the galleries above the Commons floor, journalists scribble frantically, their pens racing to capture the magnitude of what they are witnessing. Because this is not merely the exposure of one spy, but the unraveling of the most devastating intelligence betrayal in British history. A betrayal that began in the lecture halls and dining rooms of Cambridge University during the 1930s, when 5 brilliant young men, educated at the finest institution in the empire, made the decision to serve not their country, but its greatest enemy, the Soviet Union. The Cambridge Five, as history would remember them, were Harold Adrian Russell Philby, known to all as Kim, Guy Francis de Moncey Burgess, Donald Duart McLean, Anthony Frederick Blunt, and John Cairncross. 5 names that would become synonymous with treachery on a scale so vast that it would shake the foundations of Western intelligence. For generations, their betrayal reaching into the highest levels of MI6, MI5, the Foreign Office, and even the royal household itself. What Thatcher reveals on this November afternoon represents only the tip of an iceberg that has been slowly surfacing for nearly 3 decades. Ever since 2 of the 5, Burgess and McLean, vanished from London on a spring evening in 1951, disappearing into the Soviet Union like ghosts returning to their true home, leaving behind them a trail of burned operations, compromised agents, and shattered trust that would plague British intelligence throughout the Cold War. This is their story, drawn from declassified files and public archives. A story of how brilliance and ideology combined with personal weakness and institutional blindness to create the perfect conditions for the greatest intelligence disaster of the 20th century. A disaster that began not in the shadowy world of espionage, but in the sunlit courts and libraries of one of England's most prestigious universities. The roots of what would become known as the Cambridge Five spy ring stretch back to the convulsions of the 1930s, when Europe teetered on the edge of fascist domination, and young intellectuals across Britain searched desperately for alternatives to what they saw as the moral bankruptcy of their own political system. The economic collapse of capitalism seeming to offer proof that only socialism could provide answers to the world's mounting crises. Cambridge University in the early 1930s was a hothouse of radical thought, where brilliant young minds gathered in paneled rooms, thick with pipe smoke and heated debate, where the sons of privilege wrestled with their consciences as unemployment lines stretched across industrial Britain and fascist movements gained strength across continental Europe, the comfortable assumptions of empire and class hierarchy crumbling under the weight of economic reality and ideological challenge. Kim Philby arrived at Trinity College in 1929, the son of Harry St. John Philby, a noted Arabist and explorer who had served the empire with distinction, but had also demonstrated a willingness to challenge conventional thinking, traits he would pass to his son, along with a restless intelligence and an appetite for risk that would prove both blessing and curse throughout Kim's remarkable career. The young Philby was tall and athletic, with a pronounced stutter that somehow enhanced rather than diminished his charisma, drawing people closer as they strained to hear his carefully chosen words, his manner combining upper-class confidence with genuine intellectual curiosity, making him a natural leader among his contemporaries, who would follow him into the Communist Party, eventually into the service of Soviet intelligence. Guy Burgess, 2 years older than Philby, cut a different figure entirely. A brilliant but unstable character whose homosexuality, in an era of strict social prohibition, combined with his excessive drinking and reckless behavior to create a personality that should have disqualified him from any sensitive position, but whose charm and connections would carry him to the highest levels of British intelligence. His very outrageousness serving as a kind of camouflage that allowed him to hide his treachery in plain sight. Donald Maclean, perhaps the most conventionally successful of the five, possessed the kind of steady intelligence and diplomatic manner that marked him for a career in the Foreign Office from his earliest days at Trinity Hall. His tall frame and serious demeanor, masking the inner turmoil of a man torn between his privileged background and his growing conviction that only revolutionary change could save civilization from fascist barbarism. Anthony Blunt, the oldest of the group, and in many ways its intellectual leader, combined his expertise in art history with a sophisticated understanding of Marxist theory. His position as a fellow at Trinity College, providing him with the perfect platform from which to recruit other young men to the Soviet cause, his rooms becoming a salon where the future of Europe was debated, and the seeds of betrayal were planted with careful deliberation. John Cairncross, the youngest, and in some ways, the most isolated of the five, came from a modest Scottish background that set him apart from his more privileged contemporaries. His brilliant academic record at Trinity, providing him with entry to a world of opportunity that he might never have otherwise known, making his eventual recruitment by Soviet intelligence a kind of payment for the chance to transcend the limitations of his birth. The political climate of the early 1930s provided the perfect conditions for Soviet recruitment efforts, with the rise of fascism in Germany and the apparent failure of democratic governments to address the economic crisis, creating a sense of urgency among young intellectuals who believed that only decisive action could prevent catastrophe. The Communist Party, offering them a sense of purpose and belonging that their privileged backgrounds had paradoxically denied them. Soviet intelligence, under the direction of the NKVD, recognized the extraordinary opportunity presented by these brilliant young Britons, understanding that the investment of time and resources required to cultivate them properly would pay dividends for decades to come. Their eventual placement in positions of authority within the British establishment, representing the kind of long-term strategic planning that characterized Soviet intelligence operations throughout the Cold War. The recruitment process was gradual and sophisticated, beginning with ideological conversion through exposure to Marxist theory and Communist Party activities, then progressing through careful assessment of character and potential before final selection for intelligence work. The entire process designed to create not merely sources of information, but true believers who would serve the Soviet cause with the same dedication they might have shown to their own country. The man responsible for much of this recruitment was Arnold Deutsch, an Austrian communist who operated under various covers in London during the mid-1930s. His academic background and intellectual sophistication making him the perfect handler for university recruits who might have been suspicious of more obvious intelligence operatives. His patient cultivation of the Cambridge Group, representing one of the most successful recruitment operations in the history of espionage. By 1934, all 5 men had been recruited and were beginning their long careers as Soviet agents, their university years providing them with the ideological foundation and personal connections that would serve them throughout their subsequent betrayal of British interests, the friendship and loyalty they felt toward one another, creating bonds that would prove stronger than their obligations to country or crown. The British establishment, confident in its own superiority and secure in its assumptions about class loyalty, was blind to the possibility that its most privileged sons might choose to serve foreign masters. The very success of the British educational system in producing confident and capable young men, making it impossible to imagine that such men might use their abilities against their own country. This institutional blindness would prove to be one of the most significant factors in the success of the Cambridge Five, allowing them to operate for decades without serious scrutiny. Their backgrounds and connections serving as a kind of immunity that protected them from the suspicion that might have fallen on men of lesser social standing. The art of espionage, as practiced by the Cambridge Five, combined the sophistication of university-educated intellectuals with the methodical techniques developed by Soviet intelligence over decades of revolutionary struggle, creating a unique blend of amateur enthusiasm and professional discipline that would prove remarkably effective in penetrating British security services throughout the 1940s and 50s. Kim Philby's training in basic tradecraft began almost immediately after his recruitment in Vienna during 1934, when he married Litzy Friedman, a young communist who had been assigned to guide his political development and introduce him to the underground networks that would eventually connect him to Soviet intelligence. Their relationship serving the dual purpose of ideological reinforcement and practical instruction in the basic skills of clandestine communication. The techniques employed by the Cambridge Group were deliberately simple and low-key, designed to avoid the kind of dramatic flourishes that characterized popular fiction, but often led to exposure in real life. Their handlers, understanding that the greatest security lay in maintaining completely ordinary routines that would attract no attention from security services or casual observers. Dead drops, the practice of leaving messages or materials in predetermined locations for pickup by other agents, formed the backbone of their communication system, with locations chosen for their accessibility and the natural reasons contacts might have for visiting them. A technique that allowed information to flow without the need for direct contact between agents and their handlers. Philby's early assignments involved nothing more dangerous than talent spotting and assessment, his social connections and natural charm making him ideally suited to identify other potential recruits among his Cambridge contemporaries. His reports to his handlers, consisting of detailed personality assessments and evaluations of ideological commitment that would guide future recruitment efforts. On the evening of March 15, 1938, Philby met his handler, Otto Deutsch, in Regent's Park, the meeting taking place during one of London's famous spring fog banks that provided natural cover for their conversation. The two men walking slowly along the park's winding paths, as Deutsch provided Philby with his first significant operational assignment, the infiltration of British intelligence services. The meeting lasted less than 30 minutes, but its consequences would resonate for decades, as Deutsch outlined the long-term strategy that would guide Philby's career, emphasizing the importance of patience and gradual advancement rather than immediate action. The Soviets understanding that the greatest intelligence coups required years of careful preparation and positioning. Burgess's approach to tradecraft was characteristically flamboyant and seemingly careless. His handlers, recognizing that his outrageous personality could serve as excellent cover for intelligence activities, his reputation for drinking and indiscretion, making it unlikely that anyone would suspect him of the discipline required for serious espionage work. His technique for gathering information relied heavily on his extraordinary social skills and his position within London's political and cultural elite, where his wit and charm opened doors that might have remained closed to more conventional intelligence operatives. His dinner parties and social gatherings serving as informal intelligence collection platforms where secrets were shared with surprising frequency. On June 22, 1941, the day Germany invaded the Soviet Union, Burgess attended a reception at the Soviet embassy where he made contact with his new handler, a meeting that was observed by MI5 surveillance teams, but dismissed as merely another example of Burgess's eccentric social habits, the security services failing to recognize the significance of the encounter, despite their growing suspicions about Soviet intelligence activities in London. McLean's tradecraft was characterized by meticulous attention to detail and careful adherence to security protocols. His diplomatic training providing him with natural cover for international travel and contact with foreign nationals. His position in the Foreign Office giving him access to the highest levels of British diplomatic and military planning. His method of document reproduction relied on a small camera concealed in his briefcase, allowing him to photograph classified materials during normal working hours without attracting attention. The technique requiring precise timing and steady nerves, but producing intelligence of extraordinary value to his Soviet handlers. The most dramatic example of McLean's intelligence gathering occurred during December 1947, when he photographed the complete text of secret negotiations between Britain and the United States regarding the establishment of NATO, his actions providing the Soviets with advanced knowledge of Western military planning that would influence Soviet strategy throughout the early years of the Cold War. Blunt's position at the Warburg Institute, and later as surveyor of the Queen's pictures, provided him with unique opportunities for intelligence gathering. His academic conferences and research trips, creating natural cover for meetings with foreign contacts. His reputation as an art expert, making it unlikely that security services would question his extensive international correspondence. His recruitment of subagents relied heavily on his institutional authority and intellectual prestige, potential recruits being drawn into increasingly compromising relationships through a combination of ideological persuasion and social pressure, the process often taking years to complete, but resulting in a network of sources that extended far beyond the original Cambridge Five. Cairncross's work at Bletchley Park represented perhaps the most significant intelligence coup achieved by any member of the Cambridge Group. His access to ultra-secret intercepts, providing him with advanced knowledge of German military planning that he regularly passed to his Soviet handlers, potentially altering the course of entire military campaigns on the Eastern Front. His technique for copying classified materials relied on his extraordinary memory rather than mechanical reproduction, his ability to retain complex technical information, allowing him to recreate documents from memory hours or even days after reading them, a skill that made detection virtually impossible, since no physical evidence of document reproduction existed. The security protocols developed by Soviet intelligence for handling the Cambridge Five reflected decades of experience in running agents in hostile environments, with each member of the group isolated from the others, except in cases of absolute necessity. Multiple layers of cutouts and intermediaries, protecting the network from penetration or betrayal. Communication schedules were irregular and varied according to the availability of intelligence and the operational requirements of specific agents, with emergency procedures established for situations where normal communication channels might be compromised. The entire system designed to continue functioning, even if individual agents were exposed or eliminated. The psychological management of the Cambridge Five required extraordinary skill on the part of their Soviet handlers, who had to maintain the loyalty and effectiveness of agents operating under constant stress and increasing suspicion. The ideological commitment that had initially motivated their recruitment, gradually giving way to more complex mixtures of habit, fear, and personal loyalty that required careful nurturing to maintain. The operational history of the Cambridge Five spans nearly 3 decades of intelligence activity, during which they provided the Soviet Union with access to British government planning at the highest levels, their collective betrayal fundamentally altering the balance of intelligence throughout the Cold War and demonstrating the vulnerability of democratic societies to penetration by totalitarian intelligence services. Operation Barbarossa, Germany's invasion of the Soviet Union on June 22, 1941, marked the beginning of the Cambridge Five's most productive period as intelligence sources, their access to British government planning becoming crucial to Soviet survival as Hitler's armies drove deep into Russian territory, threatening to destroy the communist state before it could mobilize its vast resources for effective resistance. Cairncross's position at Bletchley Park provided him with access to ultra-intercepts that revealed German battle plans, often days or weeks before they were implemented. His intelligence reports to Moscow allowing Soviet commanders to anticipate enemy movements and deploy their forces accordingly, potentially saving thousands of lives and preserving crucial military units that might otherwise have been destroyed. The most significant example of Cairncross's intelligence contribution occurred during the Battle of Kursk in July 1943, when his advance warning of German offensive plans allowed Soviet forces to prepare massive defensive positions that ultimately broke the back of German armored strength on the Eastern Front, the victory marking the beginning of the Soviet advance that would carry the Red Army all the way to Berlin. His technique for gathering this intelligence involved regular visits to the communications center, where ultra-decrypts were processed, his legitimate duties as a German linguist, providing him with natural access to the most sensitive intercepts, his extraordinary memory, allowing him to retain detailed information that he would later reconstruct in reports to his Soviet handlers. McLean's access to Foreign Office planning documents provided the Soviets with unprecedented insight into British diplomatic strategy, particularly regarding negotiations with the United States over post-war reconstruction and the development of nuclear weapons, intelligence that fundamentally shaped Soviet policy during the critical years immediately following the war. Operation Venona, the British-American effort to decode Soviet intelligence communications intercepted during the war years, represented the greatest threat to the continued operation of the Cambridge Five, the gradual decryption of these messages beginning to reveal the existence of highly placed Soviet sources within the British government. The first breakthrough in the Venona project occurred in late 1946, when American cryptographers succeeded in partially decoding a series of messages from the Soviet embassy in London to Moscow Center, the messages referring to sources identified only by code names, but providing enough contextual information to suggest their positions within the British establishment. Philby's assignment to Washington in 1949 as the Secret Intelligence Service liaison with the CIA and FBI placed him in the perfect position to monitor Western progress on the Venona project, his regular briefings on counterintelligence activities, providing him with advance warning of any developments that might threaten the security of the Cambridge network. His most crucial intervention occurred in early 1951, when Venona decrypts finally provided sufficient information to identify Donald McLean as a long-term Soviet source. Philby's warning to his handlers, allowing them to organize McLean's escape before British security services could arrange his arrest and interrogation. The escape of Burgess and McLean on May 25, 1951, represented both the greatest operational success and the most serious security breach in the history of the Cambridge Five, their successful flight to the Soviet Union, demonstrating the effectiveness of Soviet escape procedures, while simultaneously exposing the existence of the spy ring to British counterintelligence. The operation began with a routine dinner party at Burgess's flat in Bond Street, where he entertained several guests including McLean, who had been summoned from his post at the British Embassy in Washington for questioning about his possible involvement in intelligence activities, the social gathering providing perfect cover for final operational planning. At approximately 11:30 p.m., Burgess and McLean departed the flat separately, meeting again at Victoria Station, where they boarded the 11:59 ferry train to Dover, their passage having been arranged through a complex network of Soviet assets and sympathizers who provided them with false documentation and financial support. The cross-channel ferry, Southampton, departed Dover at 1:15 a.m. on May 26th, carrying the two fugitive spies toward their new lives in the Soviet Union. Their successful escape, representing a devastating blow to British intelligence that would reverberate throughout the Western intelligence community for decades to come. Operation Gold, the joint British-American effort to tunnel under East Berlin and tap Soviet military communication lines, fell victim to betrayal by the Cambridge Five, even before construction began. George Blake, another Soviet agent within British intelligence, providing Moscow with advance warning of the project that allowed Soviet security services to feed disinformation through the tapped lines. For nearly 2 years, Philby's knowledge of the tunnel project came through his continued access to joint intelligence operations, his position allowing him to provide the Soviets with detailed technical information about Western intelligence capabilities and limitations, intelligence that fundamentally shaped Soviet counterintelligence strategy throughout the 1950s. The investigation into the disappearance of Burgess and McLean quickly focused on Philby as the most likely source of the warning that had allowed their escape. His close relationship with both men and his access to Venona intelligence, making him an obvious suspect, leading to his recall from Washington and intensive interrogation by British security services. The interrogation of Philby by Helenus Milmo on December 12, 1951, represented the closest British intelligence ever came to breaking the Cambridge conspiracy during its operational phase. The 89-page transcript, revealing Milmo's systematic attempt to trap Philby in contradictions and force him to admit his role in warning Burgess and McLean. Philby's performance during this interrogation demonstrated the sophistication of his training and the depth of his commitment to his Soviet masters. His responses carefully calculated to admit minor infractions while denying major accusations, his manner combining apparent cooperation with subtle defiance that left his interrogators frustrated and uncertain. The failure to secure Philby's confession during this crucial interrogation allowed him to maintain his position within British intelligence for another decade. His continued access to sensitive information, providing the Soviets with ongoing intelligence about Western capabilities and intentions during the most dangerous years of the Cold War. Operation Valuable, the joint British-American attempt to overthrow the communist government of Albania through the infiltration of exile groups, failed catastrophically due to advance warning provided by Philby to his Soviet handlers. The operation resulting in the capture and execution of dozens of Western-trained agents, whose sacrifice served no purpose beyond demonstrating the vulnerability of Western intelligence operations to Soviet penetration. The human cost of these betrayals extended far beyond the immediate victims, to include countless individuals whose lives were destroyed by the exposure of Western intelligence networks, resistance groups that were rolled up by communist security services, and entire populations that remained enslaved to totalitarian regimes because liberation efforts had been compromised before they could begin. The methodologies employed by the Cambridge Five to gather and transmit intelligence evolved significantly over their decades of operation, reflecting both the increasing sophistication of their training and the growing complexity of the information they were tasked to obtain. Their techniques ranging from simple observation and memory work to elaborate technical operations involving photography, code systems, and clandestine communication networks. Philby's technique for accessing classified information relied heavily on his institutional position and personal relationships, his natural charm, and apparent dedication to his work, creating an atmosphere of trust that discouraged colleagues from questioning his presence in sensitive areas or his interest in materials outside his immediate responsibility. His method representing a masterclass in social engineering that allowed him to operate with impunity for decades. His approach to document photography utilized a MI6’s subminiature camera concealed in a modified cigarette case, the device allowing him to photograph multiple pages of classified documents during routine office hours without attracting attention. His technique requiring precise timing and steady nerves, but producing intelligence of extraordinary clarity and completeness. The most sophisticated example of Philby's photographic technique occurred during his tenure as head of Soviet counterintelligence for the Secret Intelligence Service, when he systematically photographed the complete operational files of British agents operating behind the Iron Curtain, providing the Soviets with detailed information about Western intelligence networks that allowed communist security services to roll up entire resistance organizations. His process for transmitting this intelligence involved a complex system of dead drops and cutouts that insulated him from direct contact with Soviet handlers, while ensuring the secure delivery of classified materials, the locations chosen for their accessibility, and the natural reasons he might have for visiting them, creating multiple layers of security that protected both Philby and his handlers from detection. Burgess's information gathering relied primarily on his extraordinary social connections and his reputation as a brilliant conversationalist. His technique, involving the systematic cultivation of sources throughout London's political and cultural establishment, his dinner parties, and social gatherings, serving as informal intelligence collection platforms where secrets were shared with surprising frequency. His method for eliciting sensitive information combined genuine intellectual curiosity with carefully disguised probing. His questions designed to appear as natural extensions of ongoing conversations, rather than deliberate intelligence gathering. His technique requiring sophisticated understanding of psychology and social dynamics that allowed him to obtain information that his sources would never have intentionally revealed. The networking approach, perfected by Burgess, reached its peak during his assignment to the Foreign Office's Information Research Department, where his official duties involved contact with journalists, academics, and political figures throughout Europe. His legitimate professional activities providing perfect cover for intelligence collection operations that spanned the entire spectrum of Western political and military planning. McLean's technique for accessing classified information took advantage of his position as a senior diplomat with routine access to the most sensitive government communications. His method involving the systematic review and memorization of classified cables and diplomatic correspondence, his exceptional memory allowing him to retain detailed information for later transmission to his Soviet handlers. His approach to document reproduction evolved significantly over his career, beginning with simple note-taking and progressing to sophisticated photographic techniques that allowed him to copy entire files without detection. His equipment concealed in standard diplomatic pouches that attracted no attention from security services, accustomed to the routine movement of classified materials. The most dramatic example of McLean's information gathering occurred during his assignment to the British Embassy in Washington, where his access to atomic energy communications allowed him to provide the Soviets with detailed information about American nuclear weapons development, intelligence that significantly accelerated Soviet progress toward achieving nuclear parity with the United States. Blunt's recruitment and handling of subagents represented perhaps the most sophisticated aspect of the Cambridge Five's operational technique. His academic position, providing him with natural access to young intellectuals who might be susceptible to ideological persuasion. His recruitment process typically extending over months or years of careful cultivation and assessment. His technique for identifying potential recruits relied on careful observation of student political activities and personal relationships. His position as a respected faculty member, allowing him to engage in seemingly innocent conversations that revealed individual attitudes toward politics, social issues, and personal loyalty, information that guided his assessment of recruitment potential. The indoctrination process developed by Blunt combined intellectual sophistication with emotional manipulation. His approach, involving gradual exposure to Marxist theory and communist propaganda, carefully coordinated with personal attention and social inclusion that made targets feel valued and important. The entire process designed to create psychological dependence that could be exploited for intelligence purposes. Cairncross's work at Bletchley Park required the development of unique techniques for accessing and memorizing highly classified technical information. His method involving systematic review of intercepted German communications during his regular duties as a translator and analyst. His extraordinary memory, allowing him to retain complex military intelligence for later reconstruction and transmission. His approach to intelligence transmission avoided any physical reproduction of classified documents, instead relying on his ability to recreate technical information from memory in detailed written reports that he prepared during off-duty hours, his technique making detection virtually impossible, since no physical evidence of document copying existed within the secure facility. The communication protocols established for Cairncross's intelligence reports involved a sophisticated system of coded personal letters, ostensibly written to family members and friends. The messages containing intelligence information, disguised as routine personal news and observations. The technique requiring careful coordination between Cairncross and his handlers to ensure accurate transmission while maintaining perfect security. The psychological techniques employed by all members of the Cambridge Five to maintain their cover identities involved the systematic development of false personalities that could withstand scrutiny from colleagues, friends, and security services. Their method requiring careful attention to consistency in behavior, political opinions, and personal relationships over periods extending decades. Their approach to managing the stress and psychological pressure of their double lives involved various coping mechanisms ranging from alcohol and sexual promiscuity to immersion in legitimate professional activities. These techniques, serving the dual purpose of providing emotional relief while reinforcing their cover identities as typical members of the British establishment. The legacy of the Cambridge Five's operational techniques continues to influence intelligence training and counterintelligence practices throughout the world. Their methods representing a benchmark of operational security and social manipulation that demonstrates both the possibilities and limitations of human intelligence operations in democratic societies. The financial architecture supporting the Cambridge Five's decades-long intelligence operation revealed the sophisticated economic planning that characterized Soviet intelligence activities throughout the Cold War. Their handlers, understanding that sustained espionage required not only ideological commitment, but also practical support that could maintain agents in positions of influence within British society. The Soviet intelligence services allocated substantial resources to supporting their Cambridge assets, recognizing that the intelligence they provided justified extraordinary investment in their security and effectiveness, the economic value of their information far exceeding the modest financial support required to maintain their operations. Philby's financial situation throughout his intelligence career reflected the careful balance between maintaining his cover as a loyal British intelligence officer and receiving sufficient support to sustain his lifestyle and operational requirements. His handlers providing him with funds through a variety of channels that avoided detection by British security services, while ensuring his continued effectiveness as an intelligence source. The method of financial support developed for Philby involved the establishment of a Swiss bank account, ostensibly funded by inheritance from a deceased relative. The cover story providing plausible explanation for his ability to maintain an expensive lifestyle on a government salary, the funds actually originating from Soviet intelligence services, but channeled through multiple intermediaries to obscure their true source. His operational expenses, including the costs of specialized equipment, foreign travel, and entertainment of potential sources, were handled through a separate system of reimbursements, disguised as legitimate business expenses. The Soviet intelligence services demonstrating remarkable attention to detail in ensuring that no suspicious financial patterns emerged that might attract the attention of British counterintelligence. Burgess's financial support reflected his more erratic lifestyle and higher operational expenses. His handlers, providing him with substantially larger sums to cover his extensive entertainment costs and personal extravagances, their calculations apparently concluding that his social connections justified the additional investment despite the security risks posed by his unpredictable behavior. The economic dimension of Burgess's intelligence work extended beyond simple financial support to include access to luxury goods and services that enhanced his social position and operational effectiveness. His Soviet handlers, apparently understanding that his ability to maintain an expensive lifestyle was crucial to his continued access to high-level sources within London's political establishment. Maclean's financial arrangements were more conventional, reflecting his position as a career diplomat with predictable income and expenses. His Soviet support designed primarily to supplement his government salary and provide funds for operational activities that could not be explained through normal diplomatic channels. The long-term financial planning for Maclean's intelligence career included provisions for his eventual extraction to the Soviet Union, his handlers maintaining emergency funds that could support his flight from Britain and his subsequent life in exile. The preparations reflecting Soviet intelligence's understanding that Western counterintelligence efforts might eventually threaten the security of their most valuable sources. Blunt's financial support involved the most sophisticated arrangements of any member of the Cambridge Five, his handlers recognizing that his academic career and social position required different types of economic assistance than those needed by government employees. Their support carefully designed to enhance rather than compromise his cover identity. The economic foundation of Blunt's intelligence work included funding for his academic research and art collecting activities, expenses that enhanced his reputation as a legitimate scholar, while providing cover for his intelligence activities. His Soviet handlers, demonstrating remarkable sophistication in understanding the financial requirements of academic life in Britain. His recruitment and handling of sub-agents required substantial financial resources, the Soviet intelligence services providing him with funds to support the lifestyle and activities of potential recruits. Their investment in Blunt's network reflecting their understanding that successful intelligence operations required long-term financial commitment to achieve lasting results. Cairncross's financial situation was the most modest of the Cambridge Five, reflecting both his lower social position and his more limited operational requirements. His handlers providing him with minimal support beyond basic operational expenses, their calculations apparently concluding that his access to ultra-intelligence justified their investment despite his relatively modest social position. The prisoner exchange negotiations that eventually secured the release of various Western agents captured by communist security services often involved complex financial arrangements disguised as humanitarian assistance or cultural exchange programs. The Cambridge Five's intelligence contributions providing the Soviets with valuable bargaining chips in these negotiations. The propaganda value of the Cambridge Five extended far beyond their intelligence contributions to include their role in Soviet efforts to demonstrate the superiority of communist ideology over capitalist democracy, their defection, and continued loyalty to the Soviet Union, providing powerful ammunition for communist propaganda throughout the Cold War. Soviet investment in supporting the Cambridge Five after their exposure and flight to the Soviet Union reflected the continued propaganda value of their loyalty, their handlers providing them with comfortable lives in Moscow that could be showcased as evidence of Soviet generosity toward those who served the communist cause. The legal implications of the Cambridge Five's intelligence activities involved complex questions of treason, espionage, and diplomatic immunity that challenged traditional concepts of national loyalty and legal jurisdiction, their cases establishing precedents that continue to influence international law regarding intelligence activities and state security. The diplomatic costs of the Cambridge Five scandal extended throughout the Western Alliance, damaging British relationships with the United States and other NATO partners who questioned the reliability of British security services. The economic implications of this damaged trust, affecting intelligence sharing and military cooperation for decades. The institutional changes implemented by British intelligence services in response to the Cambridge 5 scandal involved substantial financial investment in improved security procedures, background investigations, and counterintelligence capabilities. The economic cost of these improvements, reflecting the long-term damage caused by their penetration of British security services. The unraveling of the Cambridge 5 began not with a dramatic confrontation or brilliant counterintelligence operation, but with the patient work of American and British cryptographers who spent years decoding Soviet intelligence communications intercepted during World War II. Their breakthrough in the Venona project, slowly revealing the existence of highly placed Soviet sources within the Western intelligence community. The first critical moment occurred in late 1946, when American codebreakers at Arlington Hall succeeded in partially decrypting a series of Soviet intelligence cables from London to Moscow, the messages referring to sources identified only by cryptonyms, but providing enough contextual information to suggest their positions within the British government establishment. The process of identifying the individuals behind these code names required painstaking analysis of personnel records, travel schedules, and operational activities. The investigators gradually building a picture of Soviet penetration that exceeded their worst fears about the security of Western intelligence services. Donald McLean emerged as the first identifiable member of the Cambridge network when Venona analysts succeeded in connecting his diplomatic assignments with specific intelligence references in decoded Soviet cables, the evidence indicating that he had been providing classified information to Moscow for over a decade. The decision to interrogate McLean, rather than maintain surveillance, to identify his contacts and operational methods, reflected the institutional pressure facing British intelligence services to demonstrate their competence in the face of mounting American criticism, the choice ultimately allowing other members of the network to escape detection and continue their intelligence activities. Philby's warning to Soviet intelligence about the impending investigation of McLean triggered the carefully planned escape operation that removed both McLean and Burgess from British territory, May 25, 1951, their successful flight providing dramatic proof of Soviet operational capabilities, while simultaneously exposing the existence of additional sources within British intelligence. The immediate aftermath of the Burgess-McLean disappearance created a crisis of confidence within the Western intelligence community that extended far beyond the specific damage caused by their espionage activities. The revelation that two senior British officials had successfully operated as Soviet agents for over a decade, calling into question the fundamental assumptions underlying Western security procedures. The investigation into the circumstances surrounding their escape quickly focused on Philby as the most likely source of the warning that had allowed their flight. His close personal relationships with both men and his access to Venona intelligence making him an obvious suspect despite his position as a senior intelligence officer. Philby's recall from Washington in June 1951 marked the beginning of a sustained counterintelligence investigation that would continue for over a decade. His interrogation by British security services, representing the most intensive effort ever undertaken to penetrate the Cambridge network and determine the extent of Soviet infiltration. The interrogation sessions, conducted throughout late 1951 and early 1952, revealed Philby's extraordinary skill in managing hostile questioning, his responses carefully calculated to admit minor infractions while denying major accusations, his performance demonstrating the sophisticated training he had received from Soviet intelligence handlers. The failure to break Philby during these initial interrogations allowed him to maintain his position within the intelligence community, despite growing suspicions about his loyalty. His continued access to classified information, providing the Soviets with ongoing intelligence, about Western counterintelligence efforts and operational planning. The public revelation of the Burgess-McClain affair in September 1955, when the two defectors appeared at a press conference in Moscow, created intense political pressure for answers about the security failures that had allowed their escape. The British government's embarrassment leading to renewed efforts to identify and eliminate remaining Soviet sources. Anthony Blunt's confession to Arthur Martin on April 23, 1964, represented the first major breakthrough in the investigation of the Cambridge network. His detailed admissions, providing investigators with crucial information about Soviet recruitment methods and operational procedures that had remained hidden for over 3 decades. The circumstances surrounding Blunt's confession reflected both the increasing pressure of the investigation and the sophisticated psychological techniques employed by British interrogators. Martin's patient approach, combining offers of immunity with appeals to patriotism, that ultimately convinced Blunt to cooperate with authorities. Blunt's revelations about his own activities and those of his Cambridge colleagues provided investigators with a comprehensive picture of Soviet penetration that exceeded even their most pessimistic estimates. His information leading to the identification of additional Soviet sources and the unraveling of networks that had operated successfully for decades. The decision to grant Blunt immunity from prosecution in exchange for his cooperation reflected the British government's calculation that the intelligence value of his confession outweighed the symbolic importance of punishment. The arrangement, allowing investigators to continue their work while avoiding the public scandal that would have resulted from his prosecution. John Cairncross's confession to American investigators in Cleveland, Ohio, on February 16, 1964, completed the identification of the original Cambridge Five. His admission of espionage activities at Bletchley Park, revealing the extent to which Soviet intelligence had penetrated Britain's most sensitive wartime operations. The revelation that Cairncross had provided the Soviets with ultra-intelligence throughout World War II created particular concern among Western intelligence services. The realization that their most closely guarded secrets had been compromised from the beginning, calling into question fundamental assumptions about wartime intelligence operations. Philby's final escape to the Soviet Union in January 1963 represented both the ultimate failure of British counterintelligence and the successful completion of one of the most remarkable intelligence careers in modern history. His flight ending 3 decades of service to Soviet intelligence, while beginning a new life in Moscow that would last until his death in 1988. The circumstances surrounding Philby's escape revealed the continuing sophistication of Soviet operational planning, his handlers providing him with multiple escape routes and support networks that allowed him to disappear from Beirut despite intensive surveillance by British intelligence services. The psychological impact of Philby's escape on his former colleagues within British intelligence proved devastating. The realization that they had worked closely with a Soviet agent for decades, undermining their confidence in their own judgment and their faith in the security of Western intelligence operations. The declassification of Cambridge Five documents, beginning in the 1970s and continuing through the present day, has provided historians and intelligence analysts with unprecedented insight into one of the most significant espionage cases of the 20th century. The gradual release of formerly classified materials, revealing the full scope of Soviet penetration of British intelligence services. The National Archives' release of many MI5 files in January 2025 marked a watershed moment in public understanding of the Cambridge case. The newly available documents, providing detailed accounts of interrogations, surveillance operations, and internal communications that had remained classified for over 6 decades. These revelations included complete transcripts of Philby's 1963 confession to Nicholas Elliott in Beirut, the documents showing how British intelligence made one final attempt to secure his cooperation before his eventual flight to Moscow. The conversations revealing both the depth of his betrayal and the sophisticated arguments he used to justify his actions. The files also contained previously unknown details about Anthony Blunt's confession and his subsequent cooperation with British authorities, including his identification of additional Soviet sources and his assistance in reconstructing the operational history of the Cambridge network. His revelations providing crucial information that helped investigators understand the full extent of Soviet penetration. The psychological profiles developed by British intelligence services during their investigation of the Cambridge Five revealed sophisticated understanding of the motivations and character traits that made individuals susceptible to foreign recruitment. These assessments, contributing to improved security procedures and personnel vetting processes that continue to influence intelligence operations today. The personal costs of the Cambridge affair extended far beyond the immediate participants, to include family members, colleagues, and friends who suffered from association with known traitors. The social stigma attached to the Cambridge name, affecting careers and personal relationships for generations. Kim Philby, Kim's second wife, suffered a complete psychological breakdown following the revelation of her husband's treachery, her subsequent alcoholism and mental illness, reflecting the devastating impact of betrayal on those closest to the conspirators. Her tragic fate serving as a reminder of the human consequences of espionage activities. The children of the Cambridge Five faced particular challenges in coming to terms with their father's legacy, their struggles to understand and accept the choices made by men they had loved and admired, reflecting the complex moral questions raised by the intersection of personal loyalty and political commitment. The institutional memory of the Cambridge case continues to influence British intelligence services through training programs and security procedures designed to prevent similar penetrations. The lessons learned from their investigation becoming integral parts of counterintelligence doctrine throughout the Western intelligence community. The establishment of improved personnel security measures, including comprehensive background investigations and regular security interviews, reflected the intelligence community's recognition that traditional assumptions about class loyalty and institutional reliability were insufficient protection against sophisticated recruitment efforts by hostile intelligence services. The Cambridge Five case study became a central component of intelligence training programs throughout NATO countries, their methods and motivations analyzed in detail to help future intelligence officers recognize and counter similar threats, their story serving as both warning and inspiration for multiple generations of intelligence professionals. The literary and cinematic treatment of the Cambridge Five story has contributed to public understanding of intelligence operations. While sometimes obscuring the historical reality of their activities, popular portrayals often emphasizing romantic or adventurous aspects of espionage, while minimizing the serious consequences of their betrayal. Recent scholarly works, based on newly declassified materials, have provided more balanced assessments of the Cambridge Five's impact. These studies acknowledging both their effectiveness as intelligence sources and the significant damage their activities caused to Western security interests throughout the Cold War. The ongoing debate among historians and intelligence professionals about the ultimate significance of the Cambridge Five reflects continuing disagreement about the effectiveness of human intelligence operations and the vulnerability of democratic societies to penetration by totalitarian intelligence services. The establishment of the Cold War Gallery at the Imperial War Museum and similar exhibitions at intelligence museums throughout the world has provided public forums for examining the Cambridge case within its broader historical context. These displays helping visitors understand the complexity of intelligence operations during the ideological struggles of the 20th century. The diplomatic consequences of the Cambridge revelations continue to influence international intelligence cooperation. The damage to British-American intelligence relationships caused by Soviet penetration, serving as a continuing reminder of the importance of security in maintaining alliance partnerships. The legal precedents established by the handling of the Cambridge Five cases continue to influence prosecution decisions in contemporary espionage cases. The grants of immunity provided to Blunt and Cairncross in exchange for their cooperation, establishing patterns that continue to guide counterintelligence investigations. The memorial services held for members of the Cambridge Five following their deaths revealed the continuing divisions in public opinion about their legacy, some viewing them as traitors who betrayed their country, while others saw them as idealists who sacrificed their careers for their political convictions. The preservation of Cambridge Five documents in national archives throughout the world ensures that future generations of researchers will continue to study their case. The wealth of available materials providing unique insights into the methods and motivations of Cold War intelligence operations. The story of the Cambridge Five represents more than simply the tale of five men who chose to serve foreign masters. Their collective betrayal, illuminating fundamental questions about loyalty, ideology, and the vulnerability of democratic institutions to penetration by those who would destroy them from within. Their success in maintaining their deception for over 3 decades demonstrated both the sophistication of Soviet intelligence operations and the institutional blindness that allowed privileged backgrounds and social connections to serve as immunity from suspicion, their case serving as a permanent reminder that the greatest threats to national security often come from those who appear most trustworthy. The human cost of their activities extended far beyond the immediate damage to Western intelligence operations, to include the countless individuals whose lives were destroyed by the exposure of resistance networks, the betrayal of escape routes, and the compromise of liberation efforts throughout Eastern Europe, their actions contributing to the continued enslavement of entire populations under communist rule. Yet their story also reveals the power of ideas to motivate extraordinary sacrifice and commitment, their willingness to risk everything for their beliefs, demonstrating the continuing appeal of ideological conviction. In an age of growing cynicism about political motivation, their legacy serving as both warning and inspiration for future generations, who must choose between competing visions of human society. The declassified documents that continue to emerge from government archives provide ongoing opportunities to reassess their impact and understand their methods, each new revelation adding depth and complexity to our understanding of one of the most significant intelligence cases in modern history. Their names will forever be associated with betrayal and treachery, but their story also serves as a testament to the enduring importance of institutional vigilance and the constant need to balance security requirements with the democratic values that make Western societies worth defending. Their legacy ensuring that the lessons learned from their deception will continue to guide intelligence operations throughout the world. The Cambridge Five achieved a kind of immortality through their betrayal, their story becoming an integral part of the historical record of the 20th century, a permanent reminder of the prices paid for ideological conviction and the continuing struggle between competing visions of human freedom and dignity.